The rain was a cold, rhythmic slapping against the gravel of the Vance Logistics rooftop. Ilara stood on the very edge. Her cheap, scuffed heels were half hanging over the drop. Below, the city of Northport looked like a circuit board of uncaring lights. In her hand, she clutched a crumpled termination notice. For 3 years, she had lived as a nobody to see if anyone would love her soul. "Ilara, get away from there! You're getting the ledge dirty!" It was Sarah, the floor manager, shielded by a designer umbrella. "Mr. Henderson wants your login credentials before you exit. You messed up the Miller account, you incompetent brat." Ilara didn't turn. "I didn't mess it up, Sarah. My husband, Mark, told me to transfer the funds to his private firm, for tax purposes." Sarah laughed, a jagged, cruel sound. "And you believed him? Mark is downstairs right now signing a merger with the CEO's daughter. You're not just fired, Ilara. You're replaced, in the office and in his bed." The words cut deeper than the cold. Ilara's hand trembled, but not from fear. From the sheer, ridiculous irony of it all. "The experiment," she whispered, "is a total disaster." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a phone that looked like a slab of dark obsidian. No brand, no buttons. Just a biometric scanner. She pressed her thumb to it. Identity verified, Ilara Sterling. Status, active. A voice crackled in her earpiece, low, dangerous, and loyal. "Ilara, we've waited 3 years, 2 months, and 4 days. Please tell me I can stop pretending to be a retired gardener." "Magnus," Ilara said, her voice dropping into a regal, icy tone. "Send the Valkyrie. Pick me up at the Vance rooftop. And Magnus, initiate a level 7 blackout on the Miller family. I want them to wake up in a world where they don't exist." "With pleasure, Mom. ETA, 180 seconds. The Valkyrie was coming. The Sterling heiress was back. 1 week later, the Miller estate was in total chaos. Mark Miller stood in his foyer, screaming into a dead telephone. "What do you mean the accounts are frozen? I'm Mark Miller. I own half of Northport Construction." He was shouting at shadows. "Actually, Mark," a voice drifted from the doorway. Ilara walked in. She wasn't the mousy girl in the polyester suit anymore. She wore a gown of liquid silver that cost more than Mark's entire car collection. Behind her stood Magnus, 6'4" of pure intimidation. "I didn't rob anyone, Beatrice," Ilara said. "I just stopped paying for your life. Magnus, show them the ledger." Magnus opened a tablet. "As of 9 a.m., this house and the clothes on your backs have been purchased by the Sterling Trust. Since you have defaulted on your lifestyle loans, which were secretly backed by my ghost accounts, you have exactly 10 minutes to vacate." "You can't do this!" Beatrice shrieked. "I'm your mother-in-law. I fed you." She was clutching at a world that no longer belonged to her. "You fed me leftovers in the kitchen while you ate steak in the dining room," Ilara countered. "Mark, I saw the bank records. You've been funneling my stipend to your mistress." "Did you think I wouldn't notice? I'm a wealth management god, Mark. I can track a single cent through 16 offshore shells while I'm brushing my teeth." Mark stepped forward, hand raised. Magnus caught his wrist before he could swing. The sound of bone clicking filled the room. "Don't," Magnus whispered. "I've been waiting 3 years for a reason to break you." The Millers were broken, and Ilara was just getting started. She retreated to her sanctuary. Her fingers moved with the speed of a concert pianist. The world thought she was gone. The world was wrong. "They're trying to brute force the Sterling firewall," she murmured. The Council of 12 had sent their best. It wouldn't be enough. On the screen, a map of the world lit up. Red lines converged on a bunker in Russia. Ilara watched them like a spider watching a fly. "I'm not just going to stop them," Ilara told the empty room. "I'm going to make them watch." She executed the God mode override. Every screen flickered to life. A single image appeared. A white phoenix rising from the ashes of a 9-to-5 cubicle. The Sterling mark. "Hello, gentlemen," Ilara's distorted voice boomed through their speakers. "I've just liquidated your short positions. You've lost 40 billion in the last 3 minutes. If you try to touch my servers again, I'll leak your browser histories to your wives and your tax records to the IRS. Your move. One by one, the red lines on her map winked out. The council had blinked. Ilara had won the first battle for the world's wealth. The New York Stock Exchange was a sea of red. The Great Reset was happening, and everyone was panicking. Everyone except the sterling heiress. She stood on the balcony, Julian Thorne at her side. Julian, the only man who had seen through her simple life mask and loved the dragon underneath. "You're going to buy the dip?" Julian asked. "I'm not buying the dip, Julian," Ilara said. "I'm buying the floor. At 2:00 p.m. the market will tank. That's when I move." At 2:01 p.m. Ilara hit a single button. She moved 500 billion into green energy and tech. The world held its breath. By 4:00 p.m. the market rebounded. She had made 80 billion in 2 hours. She had saved the market and owned it in the process. "You're a monster," Julian laughed, kissing her hand. "I'm a stock god," she corrected. "There's a difference." The world agreed. The wedding was held on a glass-bottomed platform floating over the Mediterranean, a scene of impossible wealth and beauty. Ilara stood in a dress made of fiber-optic silk that shifted colours with her mood. Today, it was the colour of a rising sun, gold and eternal. Mark and his family were there, but they weren't guests. They were the servers, dressed in cheap polyester, the same kind Ilara used to wear. Poetic justice. As Julian took her hand, he whispered, "Are you happy, Ilara?" She looked at her screens, where wealth was finally flowing to those who deserved it. "I spent my whole life being told I was nothing," Ilara said. "Then I spent 3 years proving I was everything. But standing here with you, I'm finally just me. By the power of the Sterling Trust and the Thorne Empire, I now pronounce you the most powerful couple on Earth." The empire was complete. Ilara didn't look at the cameras or the trillions. She kissed her husband, while her silent orbit satellites watched over them from above, a goddess finally at peace. Her silent orbit watching over a world she had remade in her image. Watching, waiting, protecting. This was just the beginning. The Sterling legacy had only just awakened. The return of the Sterling heiress. Volume 1. The Sterling journey has only just begun. Stay tuned for the next chapter. To be continued. The Miller name didn't just fall, it was erased. In 48 hours, every sign, every letterhead, and every ghost of their existence was being scrubbed from the city. Chapter 13. The Chairwoman. Ilara sat at the head of the Northport Construction Board. The same men who had ignored her as a mousy clerk now sat in terrifying silence. "Gentlemen," Ilara said, her voice echoing in the vast room. "The Miller era is over. We are now a subsidiary of the Sterling Trust. If you wish to keep your seats, you will learn to speak my language." But the Sterling rise hadn't gone unnoticed. Chapter 15. The Council's Shadow. A messenger appeared, not in the light of the boardroom, but in the dark of the city's secrets. "The Sterling heiress is playing with fire," the messenger whispered. They left a single gold coin on her desk, a warning from the Council of 12. "Magnus," Ilara called, her voice steady. "They sent a coin, melt it down, use it to make a collar for their lead hacker. I want them to know I'm not afraid of their myths." Chapter 18. The Thorne Encounter. The Sterling Charity Gala was the event of the century. It was here that Ilara first felt the true weight of Julian Thorne's gaze. Julian didn't walk. He commanded space. He was the only man who hadn't been fooled by her nobody act. He knew the dragon was awake. "You're a dangerous woman, Ilara Sterling," Julian whispered as they danced. "I know," she replied. "That's why you love me." The alliance was formed in the shadows of the waltz. But Magnus remained vigilant. Chapter 20. The Mole. Beneath the music and the laughter, a traitor was breathing. A Miller loyalist still lurked within the Sterling ranks. The silent war was about to get loud. A massive data leak was initiated from inside the Sterling Trust. The council was striking back. "Magnus, find them," Elara commanded. "I don't want a confession. I want an example. Show the world what happens when you bite the hand that feeds the planet." By dawn, the mole was gone. The leak was plugged. The Sterling armor was impenetrable. The silent war was hers to win. The pieces are on the board. The Dragon is hunting. Volume 2. The Silent War. The Silent War continues. Stay tuned for Volume 3. Chapter 21. The Shadow War. The Council of 12 had seen enough. They didn't send lawyers this time. They sent the world's most dangerous black hat hackers to dismantle the Sterling Trust from the inside out. They thought they could brute force the Sterling firewall. Thousands of attacks per second, hitting her defenses like a digital storm. They were relentless, but they were also predictable. Chapter 25. The Hacker. God's Revenge. In her private sanctuary, Elara stood surrounded by 30 holographic screens. She didn't look worried. She looked hungry. Her fingers moved with a speed that defied human limits. "They're using a 256-bit encryption," she murmured to the empty room. "It'll take them 10 years. I'll break theirs in 10 seconds. On the screen, the map lit up. She had traced them. Red lines converged on a bunker in Russia. Elara watched them like a goddess watching mortals play with fire. "I'm not just going to stop them," Elara told the silence. "I'm going to make them watch." She executed the God mode override. The hunt was over. Every screen in the Council's network flickered to life. A single image appeared. A white phoenix rising from the ashes of a 9-to-5 cubicle. The Sterling mark was everywhere. "Hello, gentlemen," Elara's voice boomed through their speakers. "I've just liquidated your short positions. You've lost $40 billion in the last 3 minutes. Your wealth is now my weapon. If you try to touch my servers again," she continued, "I'll leak your browser histories to your wives and your tax records to the IRS. I don't need to kill you. I'll just erase your reputations." One by one, the red lines winked out. The world's top black hat hackers had been humbled. The Council had blinked. Elara Sterling was no longer a victim. She was the architect of their downfall. "Checkmate," she whispered. The first phase of the Great Reset was complete. The world didn't know it yet, but the keys to the future were now in her hands. The war has only just begun. The Sterling legacy is written in code and gold. Volume 3. The Hacker's Wrath. The Great Reset is coming. Stay tuned for Volume 4. Chapter 31. The Red Sea. The Great Reset had finally arrived. The New York Stock Exchange was a bloodbath. Trillions were evaporating every minute as the world's financial foundations crumbled. Everyone was panicking, except Elara. She stood on the balcony, Julian Thorne at her side. Julian, the only man who had seen through her mask and loved the dragon underneath. "You're going to buy the dip?" Julian asked, leaning against the railing. Elara didn't look away from the screens. "I'm not buying the dip, Julian. I'm buying the floor. At 2:00 p.m. the Fed will hike rates. That's when I move." At exactly 2:01 p.m., the Federal Reserve announced a massive rate hike. The market tanked another 10% instantly. The world thought it was the end. At 2:01 p.m., Elara hit a single button. She executed a $500 billion move into green energy and tech, industries the Council had just abandoned. She wasn't just trading, she was terraforming. The effect was instantaneous. By 4:00 p.m., the market didn't just recover, it rebounded with a vengeance. The Great Reset had been hijacked by the Sterling Trust. She had made $80 billion in 2 hours. Julian laughed, kissing her hand. "You're a monster, Elara." "I'm a stock god," she corrected him. "There's a difference." The world had a new banker. Chapter 40. The Sovereign. Elara Sterling now held the strings of global infrastructure. The Council of 12 was no longer her enemy. They were her debtors. Julian Thorne had provided the leverage, but Elara had provided the vision. Together, They were the most dangerous pair on the planet, and the best was yet to come. The market is hers. The world is watching. Volume 4, The Great Reset. The Empire is complete. Stay tuned for the finale in Volume 5. Chapter 41, The Fall of the Old Gods. The morning of the surrender was cold. A stillness had settled over the world, as if time itself was holding its breath. The gates of the Hall of Judgment didn't just open. They groaned under the weight of 1,000 years of secret history. The world's elite were no longer coming here to rule. They were coming to face the one thing they couldn't bribe, the absolute math of Elara Sterling. Lord Vance Sterling was the first. His family had controlled European trade for 3 generations. Today, he was just a man with a pen. Her signature is just ink. But as the nib touched the paper, $40 trillion in assets began to migrate toward the Sterling Phoenix. Madame Lefebvre followed. She had tried to hide her empire in 16 offshore shells. Elara had cracked them all in 10 seconds. She signed with the grace of a queen going to the guillotine. The council was discovering that the Sterling Trust did not accept apologies. Elara watched them from the shadows. She didn't feel joy, only the cold satisfaction of a calculation finally coming to zero. The balance was being restored. Baron Roth was the third. He had built his fortune on the debt of nations. Now he was the one in debt to a woman he once called nothing. His legacy, his bank, his very name, all signed away in a single fluid motion. The old gods were falling, and they were doing it in silence. "Do not look so sad, gentlemen," Elara's voice rang out, clear and uncompromising. "You aren't losing your money. You're simply losing the power to use it to hurt people." The remaining 9 followed. A parade of ghosts, signing away the world they had spent centuries trying to control. The era of the Sterling sovereign had begun. The final signature was placed at exactly 10 a.m. In 2 hours, the world's wealth had changed hands. The Council of 12 was no more. They left as they came, in shadow. But the world they were stepping back into was no longer theirs. It belonged to the Sterling Trust. Chapter 42, The Global Hand. In London, the transition was instantaneous. The council's algorithms were purged, replaced by the Sterling firewall. In Paris, the transition was a celebration. The debt of millions was erased in a heartbeat, replaced by a new system of fair market infrastructure. Frankfurt followed. The European integration was complete. The Sterling Trust was now the heartbeat of the continent's economy. Magnus was the architect of the transition. He had spent 3 years preparing for this day. Every move was calculated. Every risk was mitigated. "The ground is secure, Magnus," Elara whispered. "Now, we look to the stars. Initiate the silent orbit protocol. The final phase is ready." Chapter 43, The Eyes in the Sky. The rockets were on the pads. The 12 satellites, the eyes of the dragon, were ready to take their place. This wasn't just technology. It was a legacy of surveillance and financial control that would ensure justice was never again a matter of chance. The fuel was pure liquid hydrogen, the same energy Elara had moved billions into during the Great Reset. Her empire was fueling its own ascent. The launch was a declaration. The Sterling heiress was taking her throne in the heavens, a goddess ascending to her silent orbit. Every mile they climbed was another layer of safety for the world she had reclaimed. The silent orbit was reaching its final position. The Earth looked peaceful from here, a jewel of blue and gold that no longer belonged to the shadows. It was now under the protection of the Sterling. The payloads deployed with surgical precision, 12 eyes in the sky, linked together in a web of unbreakable encryption. They called it the silent orbit. Invisible to the eye, but absolute in its power. A global network of surveillance and financial control. "Network, global," Elara whispered. "Identity-verified Sterling, status, sovereign." The world's heart began to beat to her rhythm. The link was established. Data began to flow, trillions of bytes per second, mapping every move of the elite before they could even think it. The map was complete. Every continent, every ocean, Every city was now part of the Sterling web. There was nowhere left for the council to hide. Chapter 47. The Cleaning. While the stars were being conquered, the earth was being scrubbed. The Miller legacy was being erased brick by brick. Beatrice Miller discovered that respect wasn't bought with pearls, but earned with kindness. She had none left of either. Mark Miller, once the Prince of Northport, now lived in a room that cost less than his old shoes. He was learning the true value of $1. The leeches were finally forced to find their own blood. The world didn't care about their names anymore. They were just shadows in the rain. Magnus had finished the work on the ground. The Miller family had woken up in a world where they didn't exist. Justice was served. The surrender is complete. The orbit is active, but the true coronation is yet to come. Volume 5, Part 1. The Fall of the Old Gods is only the beginning. Stay tuned for Part 2, The Wedding Protocol. Chapter 49. The Wedding Protocol. The Mediterranean was being prepared for an event that would redefine history. The world had seen Elara the heiress and Elara the god. Now, they would see Elara. No expense was spared, because for Elara, money had finally become what it always should have been, a tool for beauty and peace, a fleet of flowers for a new beginning. The structure was a miracle of engineering, a transparent stage where the couple would stand between the ocean floor and the infinite sky, a place beyond the reach of shadows. Everything was in its place. The silent war was over. The hacker's wrath was satisfied. The Great Reset was complete. Now, there was only the protocol of love. Julian had sent a gift. Not a company, not a diamond. Just a small box of earth from the village where she was born. For the girl who has everything, the note read, because you're the only one who knows that everything is nothing without soul. Julian Thorne had seen the dragon, but he was the only one who loved the girl underneath. Julian Thorne had provided the leverage for her revenge, but today, he was providing the foundation for her peace. Today, they would be equals. The guests arrived by sea. Kings, presidents and scientists, the new council, chosen for their hearts instead of their bank accounts. They came not as superiors, but as witnesses. Witnesses to the moment when the world finally stopped fighting and started listening to the silent orbit. And there, in the background, the ultimate justice. Mark and his family, serving the very people they once tried to emulate. A constant reminder of their greed. Then she appeared, a dress made of light and shadow, shifting colours with every heartbeat of the Sterling heiress. She didn't look at the cameras or the trillions in her accounts. She only looked at Julian, waiting at the end of the world. "You look beautiful," Julian whispered. The vows were not of property or power, but of partnership, a promise to heal the world together. The ceremony has begun, the alliance is sealed, but the final decree is yet to come. Volume 5, Part 2. The journey concludes in the grand finale. Volume 5, Part 3. The air on the floating platform was still. Julian Thorne looked into Elara's eyes, and for the first time in her life, the world didn't feel like a calculation. It felt like home. "Julian," Elara whispered, her voice carrying across the silent Mediterranean. "I spent my whole life being told I was nothing. Then I spent 3 years proving I was everything. But with you, I am finally just me." "Elara," Julian replied, "you are the dragon and the girl. I have loved both from the start. Together we are not just a couple, we are a new direction for the world. No diamonds, no gold, just obsidian. A ring that would never break, a symbol of a foundation that could never be shaken." The leeches in the background watched in terrified awe. "By the power of the Sterling Trust and the Thorne Empire, I now pronounce you the most powerful couple on Earth." The words echoed through the satellites above. In that moment, the silent orbit was complete. The Sterling legacy was no longer a story of revenge, but a story of rebirth. The heiress was home. The world watched through the Sterling network. a billion screens showing the face of a new piece. The Council of 12 was a memory. The Sterling era was a fact. Magnus looked at his heiress and finally felt the weight of 3 years lift from his shoulders. He had protected the dragon. Now he would serve the goddess. High above, the silent orbit satellites watched over them. A global network of surveillance and financial control, ensuring that justice would never again be a matter of chance. The Great Reset was more than a market move. It was a restoration of value. Her legacy was being written in every city, in every heart that had been forgotten. From Northport to New York, the Sterling mark was a symbol of a world that had been cured of its greed. A world where everyone had a seat at the table. In the silent orbit, there are no borders. There are no shadows. There is only the absolute clarity of a wealth management god, a goddess finally at peace. Her journey had taken her through the rain and the fire, and had brought her to the stars. Elara Sterling, sovereign, the end, the silent orbit, a Sterling masterpiece, Junheng. This concludes the epic journey of Elara Sterling. Thank you for witnessing the rebirth of a world. Created by J.C. DeCastro. A Sterling Trust production. The Saga of the Silent Orbit. Junheng.